Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever the case may be. This is the Daily Takeaway. Welcome live. If you're tuning in live, welcome. Hello, 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 hello. Today's episode 3, global warming. We will be discussing, global warming. For those of you that, I don't know, maybe living in a cave, a hermit like me, and don't really pay much attention to the news. The only news that you have access to is what people tell you. I've got some articles here that I'm going to read out shortly. But what are your thoughts on global warming? What do you think can be done? We're just coming off of a heat wave here in the UK, where almost all areas of Europe have been under some heat wave, where we've had the hottest years on record since 2020, 2019 for some of us, and then years before that. The UK has just smashed the temperature record here in the UK for it was 40.3 degrees Celsius. Of course, there'll be Americans saying, well, that's nothing. We get that every weekend here in Vegas or somewhere. But here in the UK, air conditioning really isn't a thing, because we live in such a temperate climate that the houses are built to keep the heat in. And as a result, when the weather is warming up like this, the houses just keep getting hotter and hotter and hotter, to the point where it becomes unbearable and outside is cooler than inside. Sure, we can get air conditioning units, but of course, when you need air conditioning units, when we know that there's a heat wave coming, all the fans, the desk fans, the swivel fans, stand fans, all of them get sold out quickly because everybody panics. Same thing with air conditioning units. My sister kindly bought us, or me, an air conditioning unit to keep us cool during this heat wave, but unfortunately everybody was ordering them, and we still haven't received ours. And she ordered it last week, and it was off of Amazon, so we were meant to be getting it days ago. It was meant to arrive on the Monday or the Tuesday, but we're now on a Saturday. Such is the heat wave that transportation stopped. People couldn't drive. It was far too hot for them to drive. So, and there are some delivery trucks that can't deliver if the payload that they're carrying is at a temperature higher than it should be. But nearly all the land areas over the last few days here in Europe has had heat waves. As a result, there are wildfires kicking off everywhere. We've had wildfires here in the UK. There are people dying of heat-related illnesses, and it's difficult for people to work in this environment. My sister's fiance refused to go into work on the Monday, thinking that the Monday was going to be the hottest day, so he booked a day off. Coincidentally, Tuesday turned out to be hotter than Monday, so he thought he got away with that one, but he didn't. And wildfires are just spreading like wildfires, and they spread far more easily and more rapidly when the conditions are hot and everything's dry and arid. Lots of tinder. And the question here now is, what can we do about global warming? What can we do? I don't think we can do much at all. I'm under the impression that we are going to struggle to wean ourselves off of fossil fuels. I think we're going to struggle because people are reluctant to give up their cars, give up their freedoms that they get from cars, give up their ability to drive wherever they want, whenever they want, to wherever they want, for however long they want. I think People will be unlikely to give up their holiday time. To combat global warming right now, I think we would have to change every aspect of life, modern life, which would mean the transportation of produce would be affected. So we'd no longer get imports, and there'll be no longer exports. There'll be no longer travelling to other countries. They're no longer travelling to other areas of the country whenever we feel like it. The problem with modern life is that it is so reliant on petrol to get the world moving, despite the best efforts of Elon Musk to create Tesla and provide renewable sources of energy for people with his big batteries and solar farms and so on. It's not enough. And it's to combat climate change would go back to the Victorian age, where you don't really leave the area where you're born because you can't travel. If you do travel, then you're travelling by horse and carriage, so you can't get there particularly quickly. You wouldn't be able to see friends and relatives in other countries. You wouldn't be able to travel to see other countries unless you're on public transport. Let's say, hypothetically speaking, they crack down on transport. You could now no longer drive more than X, Y, and Z, or no longer drive at all other than using public transport. The benefit there would be public transport would actually be full up with people. It'll actually be to capacity. How many times have you gotten on a plane and travelled from point A to point B and looked back across the rows to the back of the plane, to the front of the plane, and seen that it's not even 50% full? So we're having planes take off and land that aren't to capacity. It's almost like it's not necessarily a wasted journey, but it's not very efficient. There are too many flights, I would say. I can't remember the last time really I've seen been on a full plane. Maybe the last time I went to Florida from London was full. I believe that was the full flight. But who doesn't want to go to Florida? It's one of my favorite one of my favorite countries. One of my favorite areas of the country in the US. Not only due to the tourism, but it's the daily thunderstorms as well. There are so many flights to other countries that aren't full to capacity, so you feel like there could be some improvement there. Reducing public transport, or the frequency of plane flights would mean that more plane flights would be full to capacity. But I honestly don't see us being able to combat global warming. I don't. Call me a cynic. Call me pessimistic, negative. But I don't see a way out, because life as we know it relies on petrol. It's what keeps the world moving. And I think there are too many selfish people that wouldn't want to give up on the luxuries of life that they've earned, such as the ability to drive and travel wherever they want. Could you imagine what life would be like if the governments of the world outlawed cars and driving and we could only use public transport? It'd be mayhem. It would be absolute mayhem. Not only would you get pushback from people that don't want to give up their cars and say that we're infringing on their liberties and their freedom to travel, but could you imagine the apocalyptic view of the world where all of these abandoned cars and vehicles would just be strewn all over the place, rusting on highways, rusting in your own driveway. It, I can't see a solution myself, because the only solution I could see that would ever work is just not to drive anymore. But then I don't even believe that would work, because the carbon dioxide is already in the air. It's already causing a problem. We would need to plant more trees for a start, because I think one of the major causes of global warming is not only the burning of fossil fuels, but the chopping down of trees. Deforestation is a massive problem. Just look at the island of Madagascar, off of the east coast of Africa. Before settlers arrived in Madagascar, the entire country from head to toe was forest, unbroken forest. And we're talking a huge island, huge, that now, what was almost completely covered in forest before settlers arrived there, is now, for the most part, except for the eastern seaboard of Madagascar, the eastern side, is almost completely barren of trees, and it looks desolate. All of this chopping down of trees is increasing global warming, because every tree is like a filter. There's a famous physicist, or was a famous physicist, still is famous, called Richard Feynman. And Richard Feynman, in an interview, famously said, "Where do trees grow from?" Because most people would say, well, they grow out of the ground. They do grow out of the ground, true. But where does a tree come from? The tree comes from taking carbon dioxide out of the air, because the tree is mostly made of carbon, the trunk and everything, some minerals, water, and so on. But the majority of a tree, what it's made of, has come out of the air, not the ground. So you could say, in that sense, trees grow out of the sky, which is what Richard Feynman said. Trees grow out of the sky. Through the process of photosynthesis, carbon dioxide, carbon and oxygen, the sun's energy, the sun's radiation knocks the oxygen, separates the carbon and the oxygen atoms. The oxygen is released into the atmosphere, for which we breathe in, and then the carbon is absorbed and transported and used in the creation of more tree, more trunk, more tree. So trees are filters. They're filtering out carbon from the atmosphere, separating carbon and oxygen, absorbing carbon dioxide, kicking off the oxygen atom, and storing the carbon. So the carbon is stored all in the trunk. The tree is chopped down. The tree is burnt. When you burn, you're providing oxygen to the fire, creating carbon dioxide as the carbon and oxygen rebond, and you're releasing the carbon dioxide back into the atmosphere when you burn the tree. So you've just undone very quickly what the tree has achieved in hundreds of years. So deforestation not only removes a filter from the atmosphere, it also puts back what it had filtered. So it's a double whammy. All of this deforestation is great and all, because they can build houses and provide wood and furniture and so forth, lovely luxuries of life. But they don't plant a tree in its place. They're not they're not ensuring the next generation of trees. I'm sure they probably are now. They probably have received several slaps on the wrist and saying, look, you can't go around just chopping down all the trees. Put back, give back. You know, you're directly responsible in some way to global warming. So they probably have had many slaps on the wrist. Another advocate of trees and who is against deforestation is the Prince of Wales. I didn't know this until my mother pointed out to me that Prince of Wales is an advocate of planting trees and is dead against deforestation because he believes that it contributes to global warming, and it does. It absolutely does. So fossil fuels are not the only thing contributing to global climate change. And then, of course, the other great storage of carbon dioxide that people don't know about is the sea. The sea has a huge source of carbon dioxide storage. The seas can hold more carbon dioxide the colder it gets. The warmer it gets, the warmer the waters get, the more carbon dioxide is released. So then you're just here in a vicious circle where you're chopping down trees, so you're removing the filter, you're burning the tree, so you're putting back into the atmosphere what it had filtered out. The atmospheres are warming, which makes the seas warm, which makes them release more carbon dioxide, which makes the air warm, the atmosphere warm even more, which heats the sea up even more, so on and so on and so on. So you can imagine that there is a tipping point there where once you get to a certain point, there is no going back unless there is a global cataclysmic event which blocks out all of the sunshine across the earth and gives us a mini ice age again. I bet science... no, not even that. I don't even think scientists would be hoping for that. I think that like the petroleum the petroleum industry, all of the people that hold all of the Earth's wealth in terms of like the money in relation to petrol, are hoping that there's going to be some sort of cataclysmic event that will cool the Earth down so they can get away with selling more oil for a while. I'm pessimistic about the whole thing because I don't think there's a solution, because the solution is basically it would be the opposite of our current way of life. And I dread to think what life would be like, actually. I like to travel and see parts of the world, and knowing that wouldn't be possible would be really crap, to be honest. There needs to be a big push towards the scientific community for them to develop right now, to develop alternative sources of fuel. Trouble is there any? Are there any? We don't know. I don't believe there's enough compassion for the environment to prevent global warming getting worse. Because I believe that people are detached from wildlife, from the real world, and that's not because that they are reluctant to look. It's just that society and life is geared now into the fast lane. Everything we have to care about work and staying alive. There's not enough time for us to consider everything else. So I'm going to read out some facts to you. Some interesting facts, some of which you may have already heard. But these interesting facts are from dosomething.org. And DoSomething.org is a global movement of millions of young people making positive change, online and offline. They have compiled 11 facts, and the sources for the facts are at the very bottom of the page if you want to go on this. DoSomething.org, 11 facts about global warming. Fact number 1. If you're listening to the show and are not watching, then I shall read these out for you. Number 1. Global warming is the increase of the Earth's surface temperature due to greenhouse gases that collect in the atmosphere like a thickening blanket, trapping the sun's heat and causing the planet to warm up. Pretty basic stuff. I mean, parents taught us that. School taught us that. Fact number 2. Greenhouse gases keep heat close to the Earth's surface, making it livable for humans and animals. However, global warming is happening largely due to an over-admittance of these gases and fossil fuels, natural oil, gasoline and coal. Again, we learnt this at school. With the start of the industry in the 1700s, humans began emitting fossil fuels from coal, oil, gas to run cars, trucks and factories. By driving a smarter car, you will not only save on gas but help prevent global warming. The problem with fact number 3 is, how are these cars manufactured? Are they too manufactured through electricity, and that electricity is then generated through solar power? So then the production of something that is eco-friendly, the production process is in itself eco-friendly, so win-win. But is that the case? Fact number 4. There is more carbon dioxide in the atmosphere today than at any other point in the last 800,000 years. That would make sense if the Earth is heating up faster than it would do normally. Fact number 5. Though Americans make up just 4% of the world's population, the US produces 25% of the carbon dioxide pollution from fossil fuel burning, by far the largest share of any country. That is shocking. Shocking. Just goes to show you how many Americans own cars, and that's quite a statistic. 4% of the Earth's population, but producing 25% of the Earth's greenhouse gases. And yet, American foreign politics gets in the way of everything, and they feel that they can tell everybody what to do because they have a superpower and have nukes on their side. I don't know. That is a shocking statistic. 6. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, has both the authority and responsibility to reduce pollution from electric power plants under the Clean Air Act, the nation's bedrock air pollution law adopted in 1970. To reduce pollution from electric power plants. How much pollution is there from electric power plants? That's an interesting thought. Fact 7. Since 1870, global sea levels have risen about 8 inches. And I think the prediction is by 2050, the sea levels could rise over 2 feet. So 8 inches, 4 inches less than a foot, in 152 years. And in the next 30, it'll be there's a threat there of it rising 3 times that in just 30 years. Fact 8. Global climate change has already had observable effects on the environment. Glaciers have shrunk. Ice on rivers and lakes is breaking up earlier. Plant and animal ranges have shifted and trees are flowering sooner. Have you noticed that the seasons have changed? Here in the UK, I think most people could confidently say that the seasons on average 20 years ago and earlier were about once every 3 months. Spring, summer, autumn, winter each would last about 3 months, give or take, depending on the year. Winter might last a little bit longer, but predominantly they lasted 3 months each. Now, I've lived in Canada for a couple of years. They had winter for about 5 months. Cold, 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 cold. The only people that went out to get supplies, and those that went out not for supplies but for exercise were the rest just did for skiing and snowboarding and winter related events. But if you were to just go, you wouldn't go out and just hang out at the park in minus 35 after wind chill weather just to have a chat with your friends. You used to wrap up warm, get in your car with your your snow tires, drive to a friend's. Even that wouldn't happen. You just wouldn't do it, really. Everybody hungers up. So the winter is 5 months long. Spring comes. It's summer. And what? Spring just didn't seem to exist in Canada, and if it did, it lasted about 2 weeks before it was summer. That's now happening in the UK. The seasons are getting shorter. Fact 9. Heat waves caused by global warming present greater risk of heat-related illness and death, most frequently among people who have diabetes, who are elderly or very young. I didn't know diabetes could exacerbate heat-related illnesses. I didn't know that about diabetes. I thought diabetes, is just blood sugar levels. I wouldn't really know what blood sugar levels have to do with heat. But then again, I guess I'm just naive about what diabetes really is. Fact 10. According to the US Global Change Research Program, the temperature in the US has increased 2 degrees Celsius in the last 50 years and precipitation has increased by 5%. That's quite a lot. I mean, they're talking about global average temperatures of plus 0.8 degrees, and we're seeing massive changes all over the globe. A 2-degree shift in the United States temperatures what was barren and arid now must be desert now, must be horrible, dusty, must be very uncomfortable living. Fact 11. And the final fact, global warming puts coral reefs in danger as oceans warm. Scientists fear that coral reefs will not be able to adapt quickly enough to the resulting changing conditions, and bleaching incidents and diseases will increase. I remember watching Sir David Attenborough doing one of his documentaries. He was talking about his first trip to the Great Barrier Reef. It must be beautiful, mustn't it? To look at. He said his first visit was over 20, 30 years ago. And he was in awe of how beautiful it was. The sheer variety of fish, wildlife, coral, as far as the eye could see, with all manner of different species. Must be beautiful to see that, like a bustling underwater metropolis for fish. The Secret Life of Fish by Disney. Like Finding Nemo, just not quite. He said he went back 30 years later to the same area, to the same coral reef, and it was completely dead. And I can imagine that he became very emotional seeing one of his favourite places on Earth being completely destroyed because of what humanity is doing to the world. The problem here is humanity is doing it to the world, and we are so detached from wildlife, from the circle of life, that we are unaware of what is going on in the real world. Social media is not the real world. Television is not the real world. Dating shows and reality TV shows and what society conjures up to keep us busy and preoccupied, which, by the way, I need some form of distraction, because left to my own devices, to my own thoughts, I am my own worst enemy and I would drive myself insane. Would I feel that way if I could be in touch with nature more? I don't know. Probably not. Probably nature would be my distraction. But then again, it wouldn't be my distraction. It would be just life, wouldn't it? And people are so detached from their impacts on not only wildlife, but also people around them as well. For instance, have you seen the state of the beaches when people went to the beaches after the first lockdown? After the first lockdown, where nobody had gone out for several months, rightfully so, through fear of dying to a very new and novel virus that was very dangerous and hadn't learned to live with us yet. So it was killing everybody. The beaches were clear. The people that could were allowed to work because they didn't come into contact with anyone, like beach cleaners and things like that. Council people that clean the streets and the paths of litter and everything. The beaches were beautiful. The seas were turning blue. There was less stuff being thrown. Less stuff being thrown out on the beaches. The rivers were turning blue because less boats were being used. By all appearances, the shorelines were beautiful. Now fast forward to the first day that lockdown was closed. The lockdown was ended. Hundreds and thousands of people rush to the beaches, sunbathing, celebrating, getting fresh air, sun, sea, sand. And then you look at the state of those beaches when everybody's gone. It's like it resembles Glastonbury Festival aftermath. So we'll look at some pictures. Glastonbury aftermath. Look at just how many people don't care. They don't care for their environment. They don't care. They just look at all the seagulls there, for all the food and rubbish, and people just throw things and leave it. This woman is walking along here in Wellington boots, as you would, going through a pigsty. Don't be a twat, she says, and I'm pretty sure she's saying that about the rubbish. Look at the state of this. Why would you want to go there? This is what the beaches were like because people don't care. They're so selfish and so detached from their impact on. Look at how horrible that is. It's gross. These were the beaches. So you can see the impact that people have just in leisurely day-to-day life. That, could you imagine? It's just how detached they are from their effects on things. It's very sad. I'm going to read out this post by the National Geographic. It's been a long time since I've read anything by the National Geographic or watched anything by the National Geographic, but I usually think they're pretty good. This is the post, What is Global Warming? Explained. So, again, for the listeners who aren't watching live on stream, twitch.tv/DailyTakeaway, live every day, podcast every day. This was published in January the 22nd, 2019. It says, glaciers are melting, sea levels are rising, cloud forests are dying, and wildlife is scrambling to keep pace. It has become clear that humans have caused most of the past century's warming by releasing heat-trapping gases as we power our modern lives. Called greenhouse gases, their levels are higher now than at any time in the last 800,000 years. We often call the result of global warming because it is a set of changes to the Earth's climate or long-term weather patterns that varies from place to place. While many people think of global warming and climate change as synonyms, scientists use, quotation, climate change, end quote, when describing the complex shifts that are now affecting our planet's weather and climate systems, in part because some areas actually get cooler in the short term. Climate change encompasses not only rising average temperatures, but also extreme weather events, shifting wildlife populations and habitats, rising seas, and a range of other impacts. All of those changes are emerging as humans continue to add heat-trapping greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, changing the rhythms of climate that all living things have come to rely on. What will we do? What can we do to slow this human-caused warming? How will we cope with the changes we've already set into motion? While we struggle to figure it all out, the fate of the Earth as we know it, coasts, forests, farms, and snow-capped mountains hang in the balance. Understanding the greenhouse effect. The greenhouse effect is the warming that happens when certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere trap heat. These gases let in light but keep heat from escaping, like the glass walls of a greenhouse, hence the name. Sunlight shines onto the Earth's surface, where the energy is absorbed and then radiated back into the atmosphere as heat. In the atmosphere, greenhouse gas molecules trap some of that heat, and the rest escapes into space. The more greenhouse gases concentrate in the atmosphere, the more heat gets locked up in the molecules. Scientists have known about the greenhouse effect since 1824, when Joseph Fourier calculated that the Earth would be much cooler if it had no atmosphere. The natural greenhouse effect, that is what keeps the Earth's climate livable. Without it, the Earth's surface would be an average of 33 degrees Celsius cooler, about 60 degrees Fahrenheit. In 1895, the Swedish chemist Svante Arrhenius, I apologize if I've butchered that man's name, Svante Arrhenius, discovered that humans could enhance the greenhouse effect by making carbon dioxide, a greenhouse gas, he kicked off 100 years of climate research that has given us sophisticated understanding of global warming. Levels of greenhouse gases have gone up and down over the Earth's history, but they had been fairly constant for the past few thousand years. Global average temperatures that also stayed fairly constant over that time until the past 150 years. Through the burning of fossil fuels and other activities that have emitted large amounts of greenhouse gases, particularly over the past few decades, humans are now enhancing the greenhouse effect by warming Earth significantly and in ways that promise many effects, scientists warn. Aren't temperature changes natural? Human activity isn't the only factor that affects Earth's climate. Volcanic eruptions and variations in solar radiation from sunspots, solar wind, and the Earth's position relative to the Sun also play a role. So do large-scale weather patterns such as El Niño. But climate models that scientists use to monitor Earth's temperatures take those factors into account. Changes in solar radiation levels, as well as minute particles suspended in the atmosphere from volcanic eruptions, for example, have contributed only 2% of the recent warming effect. The balance comes from greenhouse gases and other human-caused factors such as land change. The shortest timescale of this recent warming is singular as well. Volcanic eruptions, for example, emit particles that temporarily cool the Earth's surface, but their effects last just a few years. Events like El Niño also work on fairly short and predictable cycles. On the other hand, the types of global temperature fluctuations that have contributed to ice ages occur on a cycle of hundreds of thousands of years. For thousands of years now, emissions of greenhouse gases to the atmosphere have been balanced out by greenhouse gases that are naturally absorbed. As a result, greenhouse gas concentrations and temperatures have been fairly stable, which has allowed human civilizations to flourish within a consistent climate. Now humans have increased the amount of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere by more than a third since the Industrial Revolution. Changes that have historically taken thousands of years are now happening over the course of decades. Why does this matter? The rapid rise in greenhouse gases is a problem because it's changing the climate faster than some living things can adapt to. Also, a new and more unpredictable climate poses unique challenges to all life. Historically, Earth's climate has regularly shifted between temperatures like those we see today and temperatures cold enough to cover much of North America and Europe with ice. The difference between average global temperatures today and during those of the Ice Age is only about 9 degrees Fahrenheit, 5 degrees Celsius, and the swings have tended to happen slowly over hundreds of thousands of years. But with concentrations of greenhouse gases rising, Earth's remaining ice sheets such as Greenland and Antarctica are starting to melt too. That extra water could raise sea levels significantly and quickly. By 2050, sea levels are predicted to rise between 1 and 2 to 3 feet as glaciers melt. As the mercury rises, the climate can change in unexpected ways. In addition to sea levels rising, weather can become more extreme. This means more intense, major storms, more rain followed by longer and drier droughts, a challenge for growing crops, changes in the ranges in which plants and animals can live, and loss of water supplies that have historically come from glaciers. I am someone that loves extreme weather. I am a weather buff. I do love thunderstorms, tornadoes, hurricanes, monsoons, typhoons, just wild and dangerous weather are things that I love. But I love it when it's not killing people. Because other times I find it quite beautiful to look at. But when I know that people are dying and this is these strong storms are a result of global warming, it leaves a somber, sort of sour aftertaste. And it's interesting that the warmer weather can make all weather just go mad. Weather patterns could change. We, like here in the UK, for example, the majority of our weather is guided by wind patterns usually, and those wind patterns have a lot to do with the jet stream. So the majority of our wind is drawn in from the west. So that tends to be wet because it's come over the Atlantic. It tends to be moderate. But if those weather patterns change, then jet stream can change, undulate more, or maybe even undulate less. But the fact that these sorts of changes would normally happen over hundreds of thousands of years and now happening within decades has to be indicative that our involvement is causing some massive problems. But I don't see a change. I don't see life changing very much. I think because so many people don't care. They just don't, unfortunately. I can't see any positive change in the next 20 or 30 years. Unless driving becomes banned. Or you have a limit to how much you can drive per year. Unless science just hits a massive breakthrough, and they discover an alternative source of fuel which renders petroleum products obsolete. Would the petroleum cartels allow that to happen? The petroleum cartels. It's another name for the oil and gas industry. There has been reports that some people have developed alternative sources of fuel, but their research and development and funding has been ripped away from them, and the prototypes that they have created have been seized, and they've been threatened not to pursue that course of research ever again, is sort of borderline conspiracy theory. But conspiracies are everywhere. They're happening all of the time. As we found out yesterday when a viewer told us what the CIA used to get up to with drugging people in Africa with LSD and deliberately poisoning them with STDs. The governments are always up to something. It's just the general public don't know about them because they're secret. Is it possible that the government is in possession of, or is it possible the government is in possession, or black budget programs are in possession of alternative sources of fuel that can render petroleum obsolete? It is an interesting thought. There's no evidence to suggest that that's the case, other than from a handful of scientists that claim other alternative sources of fuel are possible. It's just whether or not it's true. I want to thank you, everyone, for tuning in to today's podcast. I have recorded this 3 times, and 3 times I've had issues. But tomorrow will be another podcast, same time, 1 p.m. tomorrow, and I will post this up in the next hour on YouTube, available for you to listen to. All social media links will be posted below. If you stay tuned, we can start doing some more community stuff and start playing a few games, some activities. Thank you everyone for listening, and tune in again tomorrow. I've been Jason, your host. Thank you very much.